Thank you for joining our first general meeting of the year. We're very excited to have you. As you can see, there are instructions for Menti today, so we can have a nice interactive meeting. On all the slides, there'll be a reminder of how to log on, but the easiest way is if you use your phone to scan the QR code. So if you would like to do that now, we would love it. Go to the next slide. So to get the meeting started, we are very excited to have a few different door prizes throughout the day. And I'm going to announce our first winner, which is Delareg Lee. So you are the winner of our first door prize. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Resilient Georgia, we are very happy that you're here. Our goal is to create a statewide coalition of public and private partners. Right now, we're probably over 1,000. We haven't done a count in a couple of months, but we have quite a few folks at the table all across the state, as well as some national subject matter experts as well. And our end goal is to create an integrated behavioral health care system for the state of Georgia by making Georgia trauma informed. So we hope if you have not engaged with us before, you will after today and continue the conversation with us. Right now, we have a footprint in about 75% of the state, as well as additional programs that cover the whole state. But in terms of our regional coalitions, we have 16 right now. And we're very excited by the end of 2024 to add one more cohort, which would be 4 more regions to cover the state. So we're ecstatic about that. If you have folks and partners in those areas of the state that are not yet a color, we would love introductions. We're currently meeting with all kinds of folks and very excited about that last bit of coverage. So again, here's some instructions for Menti. I hope you all log on. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to be interactive, and especially with our topic today around food, mood, and mental health and the intersection. I think most folks love to talk about food, and we hope that you will log into Menti to ask or to answer some of our questions. So the first one, I don't know how many folks are into gardening or just cooking or eating in general, which I think most people are. But we would like to ask you, what is your favorite fruit and vegetable? So if you would take a moment to log on to Menti and add your favorite fruit and vegetable. So strawberries is a fan favorite so far. Watermelon coming in second. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts. It's funny, like a couple decades ago, Brussels sprouts I don't think would be on there. Kale. Awesome. So when we skip to the next slides, if you haven't answered the Menti question yet, please do. The questions will stay up after the slide changes, so you can keep weighing in and adding your answers. And that'll be a nice way for our follow-up document to get to folks. So I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker, Lily Bochum. She's the Executive Director of the Georgia Foundation for Agriculture. Lily?
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for letting me be here today. Yeah, I'm Lily Bochum. The Georgia Foundation for Agriculture was founded by Georgia Farm Bureau. We're based out of Macon, but we really operate all across the state. We do a lot of different work to support kind of the next generation of agricultural leaders, but I'm going to talk to you about one specific program today and the work that we're trying to do. I want to kick things off with a Menti question as well, so we can go to the next slide. But as I'm trying to lay some of the groundwork and context for agriculture in Georgia, what is the average age of a farmer in Georgia? We have some responses coming in. I was about to say it's almost getting to be an even tie. We'll see where this lands. All right. Well, so I'll go ahead and share. The average age of the farmer in Georgia is actually 58. And if that doesn't cause some concern, what I'm about to talk about next definitely will. But these are all important things that we consider as we think about supporting farmers in our state. So again, just laying some groundwork. Agriculture is our largest industry here in Georgia. It's also our oldest industry. And so we like to look at kind of what is the context in the state. I already mentioned the average age, but actually 1 in 7 Georgians work in agriculture, forestry, or related field. As I mentioned, I'm associated with Georgia Farm Bureau, and we represent nearly 40,000 farmer members across the state. Farm Bureau often is working at the Capitol, really trying to advocate for small family farms. And so we do a lot of work to really protect and support production of some of our top crops, which you guys may know, but peanuts, we got chicken, pecans, or pecan, depending on how you say it, blueberries, and spring onions, Vidalia onions, which are coming in soon. Somebody said they didn't know about blueberries. You see, my background is peaches, and everyone thinks we are the peach state, which is what we've been known for, but we produce more blueberries than peaches. South Carolina actually leads in terms of peaches. So we can go to the next slide. So I mentioned the average age, and our organization really tries to think about that next generation. We want to bring more farmers into the fold, especially with the average age going up every year. And so we try to take a step back and really think about what are some challenges for active farmers, what are some barriers to entry for new and beginning farmers. And we recognized that there was an ongoing mental health crisis in our industry and wanted to think about how an organization that represents 40,000 farmer members could help to support that in our state. So farmers are kind of really dying at suicide rates higher than ever before. And, as we look to the future, this is actually a statistic here from the United Nations, but many of you may know that we are in the midst of a massive food crisis, and we have to boost up our food production. To feed ourselves in the next 40 years, we have to produce more than the entire output of the past 10,000 years. So that is something that we really want to focus on the next generation. Yes, getting them to be advocates for agriculture, but also really to be there to get into production farming. So you can go to the next slide. So I'm going to be talking about some of our farmer mental health work. Our organization, being a nonprofit, really wanted to make sure we were taking a strategic approach and understanding the issue before we developed programming around it. We formed a unique partnership with the Georgia Rural Health Innovation Center at Mercer, working particularly with their Rural Health Sciences PhD program, which is a pretty cool program if you don't know about that. We wanted to develop, really let the data speak for itself, and we wanted to see what the specifics of the issue were. So we conducted a pilot study and a statewide study that we sent all across the state and got about 1,500 responses from farmers and spouses of farmers. When I say farmers, that included farm owners, farm managers, and farm workers. It was available in English and Spanish, and we set it up so we could really understand what the different demographics were, and trying to dive into what were stressors for the various demographics and what are coping mechanisms, and how do we work on developing tailored solutions. So I'll share some of that data in the next little bit, but we really wanted to go out, try to address stigma by just letting the numbers, like I said, speak for themselves. So we did about 50 presentations at national and local meetings. We're actually working on expanding this research with American Farm Bureau nationally, so other state farm bureaus can have data that we can aggregate and look at a national and regional level. And when we presented the data, particularly, we went to our county presidents meetings. I'll explain Georgia Farm Bureau structure in a bit, but we have an office in every county in the state. And we had folks come forward and say, you know, this is something I'm noticing. You know, I've had friends and neighbors. And so really we started a conversation within our organization and more broadly. And then we worked to form a coalition. There's other universities, you know, beyond Mercer, like UGA with their extension services that are wanting to work on this issue. So we recognized we needed to form a coalition of organizations to work on this together. So the Georgia Agricultural Wellness Alliance was formed last year, and recently we've been hired an executive director to support that. Mercer's Georgia Rural Health Innovation Center has supported. And now we're really in our next phase where we're trying to build upon the data and really put programming in place. So we're going to bolster kind of all of these efforts in developing statewide trainings for mobilizing our network, our volunteers, our county offices. I sit on the American Farm Bureau Sounding Board, so I'm learning about what's happening in other states at the county level. And we're going to be developing a program guide of interventions. So anything from doing a farmer appreciation campaign or a Good Neighbors project, which they're doing in Colorado, for example, to hosting, you know, mental health support at Ag Safety Days, more kind of full-scale programming. We're also going to be developing some awards within Georgia Farm Bureau structure to really empower and mobilize our county offices. So this is really where we're at today. You want to go to the next slide? Here's some things that we learned just to kind of lay the groundwork from our study. I wanted to share with you all. You know, 42% of all farmers have thought about dying by suicide at least once in the past 12 months. That's a very concerning statistic. You guys are welcome to read this report yourselves. But one thing I want to pull out as we think about getting more people into farming, 61% of first generation farmers thought about dying by suicide in the past 12 months. So as we work with more folks who may be the first in their family to farm, we really have to think about how to support them through the stressors of farming. So please look at this study if you haven't, and think about rural communities. Farming is huge in our state. I know many of these folks work across our state, all of these grantees through Resilient Georgia. So if you want to go to the next slide. I want to encourage you to think about this farmer peer network and where your organization may sit in this, where you can work to support farmers beyond just family and friends, thinking at the community at large. There's a big role we've seen that ag teachers can play, faith leaders, you know, other farmers as well. If you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to encourage you to connect with your local county farm bureau. Here's kind of how our structure works, but we have a state organization and the foundation, which is where I sit. We have 10 different districts that we operate in. Each district has their own board director and program area chairs. And then we've got 158 county offices. We just don't have one in Chattahoochee County where the military base is, but each county has its own board of local leadership, local farmers, office staff, and program chairs who are doing things like women's leadership committee, young farmer and rancher. We do a lot of ag in the classroom work. So I want to encourage you to reach out and connect with your county farm bureaus as we are rolling out doing some more of this work, and there may be lots of opportunities for partnership. So I'm sure they're gonna share my information, and I did see someone wants a link to the study, so we will share that. But I know we've got a lot of speakers ahead of us, so I'm gonna go ahead and pass things over to Dr. Deidre Grimm, Executive Director of the Forsyth Farmers Market. So thank you guys for letting me be here. Deidre, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you all for having me this morning. So I am, as Lily said, the Executive Director of the wonderful Forsyth Farmers Market. And before we get into the work that I love to do so much, I'd like to start off also with a Menti question. So rate each of these statements on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the strongest disagreement and 7 being the strongest agreement. Food is closely tied to my relationships with others. Food is a way for me to connect with my cultural traditions. Sharing food with others makes me feel closer to them, and making food for others is a main way I show care for them. Ooh, all right. Okay, looks like sharing food with others makes me feel closer to them. And I think those are all tied to all four of the statements. Um, I always kind of not necessarily like to talk about myself, but I share why this work is just so personal. Um, because sharing food is, just a way of showing love or care for other people. And one thing I did was I started out, unfortunately, um, maybe a few years ago, over 300 pounds. And I knew I needed to change some dynamics in the way I ate because I couldn't sustain the lifestyle I needed to raise two boys who played soccer, volleyball, um, football, every last thing with a ball at the end of it. And so, nonetheless, I had to make some switches and changes to ensure that I could be the mother that I needed to be. But I also recognized that my relationship with food needed to change because that was my comfort and my solace. So, fast forward, unfortunately, I went through postpartum depression and I found myself back into that state. And so I said, okay, Deidre, we're going to do better. And at the end of the day, I am happy to say that, we have changed some shifts, not only just in my household, but here in Savannah at large. And so if we could go to the next slide, please. So, Forsyth Farmers Market. A lot of people think Forsyth Farmers Market is in Forsyth County, Georgia. No, we are in downtown Savannah, Georgia, one of the most beautiful areas here in all of Georgia, or even in the South. We're touted in all of these wonderful tourism magazines. And so we've been around for about 15 years. And we started out with our Saturday flagship market. We had about 5 to 6 farm vendors on roster. But we're rolling forward in 2024. We have over 80 vendors on roster. We are one of Georgia's only food-centric farmers markets, meaning you won't see any artisans or crafts here. You'll always see our farmers are at the center of everything we do. So we have a 60-40 model where farmers or ag-based businesses are 60% of our vendors. But quickly, our 6 fearless women who started the organization saw that it was critical to ensure that our community had access to food. So I'm gonna give you some context. While Chatham County, Georgia has over 300,000 residents, 47% are Caucasian, 43% are African American, 7% are Hispanic, and, so it's a really sobering situation when I look at the overall social determinants of health scales here, right? Overall, we have a 44 out of 100% scale. So when we're talking about food and nutrition, we're at a 53%, economy, 60%, even though we are the second largest port here in the nation. Equity is at a 27%, health equity is at a 30%, and housing is at a 38%. So I give you that background because research shows that food insecurity can take a significant toll on mental health, leading to increased stress, anxiety, depression. And so therefore we work head on by addressing these issues to ensure that we are providing wraparound services and supporting a community network while we don't just nourish bodies, but we also nourish minds. So fast forward, I've been in this role about 2 years. No, that's fine. You can move to the next slide. We went from 4 programs to 12 programs that encompass farmer stability while addressing food insecurity and access. And so we use the hashtag SOW, S-O-W, much more than a market. So as you all can see, the farm truck 912, this is Georgia's first mobile farmers market and one of the few in the United States. So Forsyth, our Farm Truck 912 isn't just about delivering fresh produce communities. We come in and we have communications and understanding what the community needs. Because the last thing we want to do is make decisions for people without them. I have a phrase, nothing about us without us. So that means my seat at the table is not for me, it is for the community as a whole. And so we work and produce and drive initiatives around food, but we also understand that food builds community. And we lost a lot of that during the height of COVID. And so we want to make sure that we are centering place to ensure that we are cultivating mental wellness and fostering connections. And we turned it into a party. We literally come out there with our boom box. We have a good time. We have food demonstrations. And while they can savor the goodness of the food on the truck, we talk about the issues that are really pressing. So we are not licensed mental health professionals, but what we do is also point people to the right resources that can assist them. So we would love for anyone to come and join this movement. And if you know of anyone that may not know of our services, we ask that you please, reach out to me afterwards. Next slide, please. So our food pharmacy, it's all hands on deck, literally. It's an extension of all of the work we do. So we go beyond providing nutritious vegetables and fruit. And we look at the intricate link between food insecurity, healthcare, and mental health by offering a holistic approach to wellness. We supply fresh, locally sourced produce at no cost to all of our participants. So the first year I was here, we had about almost a little bit under 200 people on roster. And in less than a year, drum roll please, we have over 1,700 people on roster now. That is, it speaks to the work, but it also speaks to how we need to address food insecurity and seeing this as what it is, a mental health as well as a public health crisis. We see that we also offer resources around comprehensive care tailored to their needs. So one of the some of the tenets around it is that it's a chronic diet-related illness. You are in jeopardy of being food insecure, whether it's low wealth or at a place of being in transitional housing. And so we alleviate that stigma of eating healthy that is unattainable, unaffordable, as well as looking at how we can help others center and ensure that they are healthy every step of the way. Next slide, please. So I'd like to also share this story, right? So we probably have these wonderful healthcare professionals on this call. And so what I like to say is when I had children, my oldest biological child is now 20. The youngest is 2 years old. I have lost my mind totally. But nonetheless, I did not even remember there was this 100 foods before one, even with my youngest child. And so with Tiny Tots Trailblazers, we understand promoting mental health and wellness starts at a young age. And so we partner with early childhood education centers to teach about healthy foods and how to integrate these strategies into these youth diets. We educate the nutrition managers, center staff, the youth, and their parents specifically on the importance of nutrient-dense foods. And so we also get them out in the gardens, have them toiling soil, and really affecting how their mood shifts, right? So I will say I am the first partaker of anything that I do. So just in thinking about the statistics of children that eat unhealthy and go to school, how can a child focus if they're eating sugary cereals and highly processed foods? So we reduce that stigma and really taking back and helping the parent understand that you can produce something even on the fly that would be a great option for them to eat. So we also promote this through emotional resilience and mental wellness. Next slide, please. So we're going to tackle two particularly culturally based programs, but all are welcome to join. So our taste of eating, well, let me rewind. I really think that eating healthy should be fun, but also culturally appropriate and relevant. So our Taste of African Heritage cooking class highlights the vibrant flavors and rich cultural heritage of Africa, where culinary exploration meets mental well-being. So you can see anywhere between 26 to almost 40 people in our classes. And what they're doing is providing or creating a meal together. We have a lot of seniors that come. And when you think about seniors, sometimes I think about my grandmother who passed when she was 105. She didn't feel lonely because she had someone living in the house and 2 doors down or 2 doors up, because that was just the centralized situation of things. But unfortunately, we're seeing seniors feeling more lonely these days. And so this is a way to get them more active and back out into the community after COVID. And so these are hands-on cooking classes, combined with the educational workshop, and really embarking on a journey of self-discovery and culture. So here in Savannah, we're in the Gullah Geechee corridor, so all of our foodways have contributions from the African diaspora. So it's only fitting that we have a Taste of African Heritage program here with us. And then we talk about our Hispanic outreach, right? So we have an emerging population of the Hispanic community here in Savannah. And so one thing I always want to center myself is making sure that I embody all of the aspects that my grandmother instilled in me. And she was a civil rights fighter. And so I believe that, you know, DEI should not just live on a shelf. It has to live at the core and heart of everything that you do. So therefore, we ensure that we tackle food insecurity as well as health, better health outcomes, and prioritizing mental health within marginalized communities, specifically in this program, the Hispanic community. We have our wonderful programs that go out there, our farm truck, food pharmacy, Tiny Tots, Trailblazers, everything. But we ensure that we have valuable resources that are written in their native language. And so we're also looking at how we prioritize families and looking at what it is that they need to ensure that their households are the foods that we serve are culturally relevant. So it's an ongoing conversation. Some of you all may not know, but my background is in urban planning. So what I don't do is come in with my preconceived notions, although I lived in California for over a decade. I am not the subject matter expert here, so I take my cues and charges from other people. And so I'm here to continue this great work. And as I said, this is not an expansive, next slide, I'm so sorry. This is not an expansive showing of everything that we do. But if you use some of these links right here, you can learn about everything that we do. And we're excited about all of the work because we're here to support not just our community, because our farm truck even goes to Augusta, Columbus, and have been asked to come to Atlanta and as far as Tennessee. So if you ever need us, make sure you come and see us. And I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Kelly Pocock, who is a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner at the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Kelsey, take it away, please.
I'm sorry. Joy, is it Joy? Yeah. Joy Getz from the Atlanta Community Foundation is our next presenter. Sorry about that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I am thrilled to be able to offer another Menti opportunity for us to kind of explore what food means to us. So if you could go ahead and scan that code if you already haven't. And can we move to the next slide? Thank you. Oh, I suppose I should have introduced myself a little bit more. Joy Getz, I'm the nutrition manager at the Atlanta Community Food Bank. And something that has kind of come to light, especially during the pandemic, is trauma-informed nutrition education. And one of the things that really got me thinking about it was this graphic, which came from an organization out of California called Leah's Pantry. And there is a questionnaire called The Meaning of Food in Life. And it kind of helps us connect to all of the ways that food brings meaning into our lives. So just a minute ago, we filled out a couple of questions about the social aspects of food, but there's also the aesthetic aspects of food, how it can be a work of art. And you know, I've heard that food is the only art form that appeals to all 5 of our senses. That was really interesting. Thank you. So let's go ahead and start answering those questions so we can see where we are. So I'm a dietitian, so I of course, I wanted to choose the health domain, but there are 5 different domains that you can take this quiz for. So, all right, we're seeing a lot of people reacting strongly with, I get satisfaction from knowing the food I eat is good for my health. I feel that nourishing my body is a meaningful activity. Brings me comfort, eating in a way that expresses care for my body. I love it. That's so wonderful. And while we're talking about that, one of the things that has been a big shift for me in the way I think about food as a dietitian and healthcare professionals in general, I think we're kind of trained to think about food as a vehicle for bringing calories, protein, micronutrients into our bodies, right? And so during the pandemic, when we were all thinking about self-care a lot more than we ever had before, I started thinking about, okay, well, what if I like made this shift to start thinking about food as nourishment and a way that I care for my body? And it really transformed my relationship with food, my relationship with other people, and kind of set the stage for becoming bringing trauma-informed care to the Atlanta Community Food Bank. Next slide, please. Great. So I'm just gonna pull a couple of slides here so some of these slides are things that I've pulled from the trainings that we've done in-house here at the food bank. Some of them have I've developed specifically for this. So when we think about trauma-informed food banking, what does that look like? Well, first of all, realize you may recognize these 4 R's: realize, recognize, respond, resist. But essentially realizing the way that trauma affects our communities. So as food banking, we are serving people who are in a crisis mode, right? Financial crisis for whatever reason. And so understanding and recognizing and addressing the social determinants of health and wellness and all the inequities that are caused by trauma and by the various DEI issues that are present in our culture and in our service area. So at the same time, as I've been starting to think about this, at the food bank, we started embarking on a DEI journey. And so just became very obvious that trauma-informed care was kind of a way of kind of putting boots on the ground to all of that we were learning about DEI, and kind of giving us some tools to put those practices into action. So realizing the way that trauma has impacted the communities that we're serving, starting to recognize what those signs and symptoms of trauma are, with ourselves, with our coworkers, with the partners that we're serving, and then in the neighbors that our partners are serving. And, you know, working, we all know that it can be really stressful sometimes, and you're constantly serving and thinking about these kinds of social issues and working with people that are in a crisis state. And so just understanding that these difficult behaviors are a sign of trauma, that the person might be in a fight or flight mode, kind of helps to create a little bit of space between us and the person, and helps us not to take things so seriously. So in effect, kind of there's a little bit of protecting against some of that secondary trauma. And then as well, I think it helps us develop more compassion for the people when they're showing up that way. And then also compassion for ourselves and for our coworkers when we see signs and symptoms of secondary trauma showing up, just being able to see person is not being a bad person. This person is in fight, flight, freeze. It's been completely paradigm shifting for us. Responding with compassion. So first, you know, to kind of have some tools to de-escalate when somebody presents in a very heightened emotional state. And then also how we can kind of set up the environment of food pantries to help people feel more calm and more regulated and safe when they do show up, to kind of prevent some of those things from emotions from escalating. And then, of course, resist re-traumatizing the people who are coming to us for help through using trauma-informed principles. And then through all of this, how do we care for ourselves, our staff, our partners, all of the people who are doing this work, our volunteers, recognizing that the work that we're doing carries inherent risk for secondary trauma, and we need to be mindful of that. Next slide, please. So to us, the essence of being trauma-informed is this paradigm shift. And we have found that it profoundly changes the ways that we view and relate to our neighbors and to the work that we do. And people get this message that there is something wrong with you from so many places. It's very easy to internalize that. And when somebody shows up at a food pantry, they're in a crisis situation. It might be that they fought through traffic to get there after working 2 jobs. It might be that they're in acute financial crisis, or maybe it could be generational poverty, and this is how they know how to feed their families. But most of the time, people are in some kind of a crisis. And then on top of that, they may be experiencing this shame, this stigma, and frustration from navigating food assistance programs. So simply reframing what's wrong with you, why do you have to access this food program, to what happened to you, something terrible must have happened to you, moves the blame and shame away from the individual, and is the first part of creating a safe environment for our neighbors when they come to us for help. This better helps us to understand what people are going through, what people are coming from, and also helps us see the opportunity that we have that is so much more than just feeding people. It's how do we use this to open the door to helping with resilience? And I think it kind of helps to inspire the people who are working on a daily basis to kind of make this work a reality. Next slide, please. I've also been thinking a lot about the Strengthening Families framework from the Center for Social Policy. So essentially, my understanding of trauma is that it is caused by extreme stress without enough support to buffer it, and that there are several, depending on who you ask, several protective factors that sorry, I got distracted by things popping up in the corner. Several protective factors that can prevent toxic stress, tolerable stress from becoming toxic stress. And so one of those is concrete support in time of need, which you think of food banking, that's pretty obvious, right? We are providing food, groceries. I think it's really important that we're also we're providing groceries that aren't necessarily that you can't purchase with food stamps, things like diapers, things like cleaning supplies that people need to have. So that also creates some buffer in their diet, in their budget. So access to this concrete support and services to address a family's needs help to minimize some of the stress caused by the challenges. And then we also provide, in addition to that concrete support, providing connections to services like SNAP assistance. Like a lot of our partners also provide other assistance on site, like English classes, like help with resumes, help with housing, etc. And so those are all ways to provide concrete support to the people we're serving. Another protective factor they listed was social connections. And I think this really is something we haven't thought as much about as we could until recently. But building those social connections with our neighbors and then providing opportunities for social connections between our neighbors helps people feel seen and respected, have a sense of trust and belonging, and is a big part of helping people feel safe and lower that stress. And so we've been thinking about, it's a whole lot more than food. And we used to think about it as, here's a bag of food, we're feeding you, or hope that you're not hungry. And now it's more like, okay, we can't stop the rain. We're going to provide the umbrella as best we can. And the other things that we are able to provide you to help reduce the stress and shame and stigma. Next slide, please. This is also very similar to a slide that Leah's Pantry shared in a training, and it's something that I keep going back to when I think about this. What can we do to reduce shame, stigma, stress, confusion, and a scarcity mindset for our neighbors, for our partners, for ourselves? And then what can we do to promote a sense of stability, confidence, connection, and positive experience? And I love what Deetra was talking about when she was like, we make it a party. We have music, we have cooking classes. So lots of, I feel like what she was talking about in her work is a perfect example of a lot of this. And I think sometimes in a warehouse and operational kind of setting, it's really easy to get into the mindset of like, let's get those pounds out the door. And instead, when we think about, okay, how can we be creative and what can we do to provide connection and positive experiences, some stability in terms of the types of food that we have available on hand. We want people to think, to feel confident that they can go to the food pantry, be able to find what they need, and then go out and use their SNAP dollars to get the other food until that runs out, and then use the money in their budget. And so it's a little bit of a change of mindset in that way. Next slide, please. I don't know if you've felt like this before. I think a lot of people working in human services may have felt like this. You've got phone on one hand, coffee on the other hand, trying to go and help everyone else. We know that secondary trauma is real, and I think it's really important that we start talking about it internally and with our partners. And so I'm thrilled to be able to say that we've started offering some trauma-informed training, just a very basic overview. to our staff, and we're now integrating it with our new staff orientation. And it's going to be an ongoing conversation, but I think just having this shared language and just having that, a little bit of that aha, like that paradigm shift, can really help people be able to prevent secondary trauma like we were talking about. And then also for managers, especially to be able to recognize secondary trauma when they see it, and then to be able to respond appropriately. Next slide, please. And lastly, as the manager of our nutrition and wellness program, it was a big paradigm shift from the way that we started to think about the way we view nutrition education. So we started with the stages of change, which is kind of like, if people know better, then they'll do better. Let's meet them where they're at, to more of a social ecological model, which is, people don't make decisions in a vacuum, right? An individual exists within the context of relationships, community, and society. And let's take the burden off of the individual, and where can we make changes within these larger circles that will help this individual, but also everybody else. And so that we're not placing an extra burden on the people who are coming to us for help. So if you're in public health, PSE, policy systems and environmental interventions is kind of the way we are headed in the future. And I'm very excited about this new direction. Okay, I am thrilled to be able to, thank you, Nikki. Thrilled to be able to hand it over to Stephanie Terrell, co-owner of A Better Way Grocers.
Good morning, everybody. I want to get us started by doing our Menti question. Okay. And I would like everyone to kind of chime in, because I know everyone has their perspective on food insecurity. So if you would please go ahead and log on so we can get some responses. What issues have you observed that impact food insecurity? We know most of it has been transportation. Okay, we got a couple that are coming in. All of that, yes. Okay. Wow. Okay. We got a lot of activity, a lot of input. All of those. Well, while you guys still have all of those coming in, I'm going to go ahead and get started for the sake of my time. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Tiffany Terrell of A Better Way Grocers, and my segment is food, mood, and mental health. And I'm going to be talking to you guys about why we created our mobile grocery store. Next slide. Okay. While I'm talking about that, I just kind of want you guys to just kind of read this so I can paint the landscape. So we created a mobile grocery store. We created it at a time right before the pandemic, and right around the time when a lot of grocery stores were closing in our area. And people kept talking about, food deserts, food insecurity. And, we were like, okay, what are some things that we can do? And so upon just doing some research, I was like, oh, we can create a mobile grocery store to go throughout these communities that don't have grocery stores. And that way it'll help them get access to food. Little did we know there was another issue that was food education. And so with that being said, you had to teach people, how to eat certain foods that traditionally wasn't used to eating certain things. And so with that also, we started thinking about what are some ways that we can help people eat healthier. So we created a round of recipe cards. We talked to the people and tried to find out exactly, what were some of the issues. And so this slide, as I painted that landscape, this slide kind of creates what is going on in these communities. When we look at dollar stores, when we look at convenience stores in these communities that lack grocery stores, these are some of the items that most of them are eating in these communities, which also connects the gut to the brain. And when we look at the development and growing of in these communities, we can understand that some of the behaviors that are being shown into these communities. Okay. And what we've learned, if people knew better, they would do better. Just talking to the people on the ground as we've done the work, they're becoming more familiar with different types of food that traditionally they wouldn't eat. When you look at some people, when we talk about a nice salad, they'll say, well, I'm not wanting to eat that. That's rabbit food. And then there's some of the expression of what people consider, white folks' food. So we had to really learn our communities and educate them around what food does for the body. Diet. And when we look at it, we've seen the data throughout. We know that diet is a major part in how we all function. Diet can affect the cognitive and behavior in children. And we all know that the saying of eat your breakfast, eat your breakfast. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. But we have a lot of children who omit breakfast and also eat different types of sweetened cereal bars and sugars for breakfast. And then we know that not eating breakfast deteriorates the mental performance when children go to school. Okay, next slide. I was kind of cut off. Also, when we look at the data, and it goes hand in hand. Dougherty County has the highest rate of food insecurity of all 159 counties in Georgia, and one of the highest rates of food insecurity in the nation. Nearly 27% of Dougherty County residents lack food insecure, lack adequate access to health, affordable groceries. Next slide. Okay. Interventions and solutions. What we did as we created a Better Way Grocers, we created a affordable means for people to be able to access groceries. In this bus, we've taken everything out and added coolers and freezers to allow people to have a one-stop shopping experience in our single aisle mobile grocery unit. Next slide. Okay. This right here is a picture of when we're gathering with residents in certain communities. We provide social inclusion. Not only are these people able to come out and shop, they're allowed to touch things, they're allowed to pick, they're allowed choice. So it gives them their independence of being able to pick something that's first quality product. And it gives them a choice to pick and to touch, to see it, to be able to just have a good conversation about what is helpful to them. Choice is good when it comes down to food access. Like I said, it just gives people the liberty to be able to make a choice. And we all know that, again, food insecurity, and improved mental health outcomes. We do that in various communities. Next slide. Okay. And I would be remiss if I did not thank our partners of United Way of Southwest Georgia for elevating our work and allowing us to have this conversation. Thank you, United Way of Southwest Georgia. And then next, I want to bring on Miss Kelsey Pocock. Oh, one other thing. I'm sorry, I forgot. The winner of the door prize goes to Miss Kathleen De Silva. She'll be receiving a book from Michael Twitty, Yummy Georgia Grown Foods, recipe cards from A Better Way Grocers, and with family farming stories. Welcome, Kelly Pocock.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here. As Tiffany said, my name is Kelsey Pocock. I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And if you want to go ahead into my first slide, I want to talk about what we are going to discuss today before taking a moment to kind of center ourselves. So we have, go ahead and back one more to the entry slide. There we go. So we have learned a lot about food insecurity today and also how that can affect our emotional wellness in the state. So I want to shift a little bit to feeding and eating disorders. So this is when it crosses from kind of being something that affects our lives to where it's an impairing our ability to either participate in social or education level activities that we want to do as individuals or adolescents. So basically it's interfering with our livelihood. So I want to first say that feeding and eating disorders is a very sensitive topic, and I want to make sure that we're all choosing to take care of ourselves and what we need in this moment. So if there is anybody who needs to step away from this conversation, my time slot is about 15 minutes, and we are going to provide some resources during that time, as well as my information if we need a safe landing spot for people. But feel free to choose yourself in this moment if you don't think this information is for you. So I came into this work predominantly as a nurse. I graduated from nursing school and I wanted to work with pediatrics, and I landed on a floor that housed many patients with feeding and eating disorders. And I found that passion and then pursued that into a psychiatric career. So I want to take a moment here. I know some of you may be driving or having lunch, but if you can, just shut your eyes and just picture an individual with an eating disorder. Think about what they might look like to you, what socioeconomic status they may be, what race, gender, what body size they may live in. Let's just take a moment. Let's really try to draw up an individual in our mind. Many people tell me when I do this exercise that they're picturing either a young adult or middle-aged white female, often living in a very small body. And what I want to start this conversation and help center us in is to realize that that's not the case. That's not the data we're seeing. Eating disorders do not discriminate for race, socioeconomic status, gender, and most importantly, body size. So we may not even know who's struggling around us. And it's important that we change the culture of how we communicate about food and bodies to protect those around us that we may not know are worrying about these situations, but also to support our own wellness in how we do this. Let's switch to the next slide and just talk about what we're seeing in our adolescents community. So this is considered preclinical. So these are things that we're concerned about, but they don't have an eating disorder, right? They haven't broached that, but these are concerning behaviors. When we think of a child, we think of their job as to go to school and make friends. And when you add kind of adjusting to your body and feeling comfortable in your body to that, and when those things aren't happening, it can really impair that functioning and also make waves that will affect them in their futures as adults. So in this study, we see that 50% of females and 30% of males dislike their body. 62% of females and 28% of males are actively trying to lose weight. Again, this is the adolescent population. About the same portion are actively dieting. And we see 68% of females and 51% of males are exercising not for quote unquote health or how they can move their body, but to try to affect their body size specifically or to maintain a certain figure that they want to continue. So when we go from this population and now we're saying, okay, what does this look like in our eating disorder community? Like, how is this laying out? We go to this next slide with more facts. So what we see, if we could go ahead and switch over, is that 9% of the US population, or 28.8 million Americans, will have an eating disorder in their lifetime. The global eating disorder prevalence has increased in the past 20 years. 22% of children and adolescents worldwide will show disordered eating. This could be true feeding and eating disorder behaviors needing treatment, or just a dysregulation between their emotions and how they feed themselves. This is a really important piece I want to highlight. So less than 6% of people with eating disorders are medically underweight. They are 2.45 times more likely to engage in disordered eating behaviors. However, they are identified and treated at half the rate as those living in lower body weights. And this is important because it just shows that it is not the typical image of someone that you think of when you have an eating disorder. There are people among us who are struggling with this, either on the preclinical level or with true feeding and eating disorders that need our help. It's not just the patients that are struggling with this. There are caregivers and family dynamics that are completely off-railed by these eating disorders. And it has been shown that caregivers of patients with eating disorders are struggling more than those with schizophrenia and depression. So it is so important that we are surrounding them with resources the same way we surround others. We can go ahead to the next slide, where I want to talk a little bit about what feeding and eating disorders are. This is not a deep education on eating disorders, so I don't want to dive too deep, but basically the three bolded ones are the ones that we cause significant malnutrition and we often see requiring hospitalization in children's. But the feeding and eating disorder is really the overarching diagnostic topic that we use that includes anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa, which is behaviors, rather restricting what you eat, making yourself throw up, or using laxative abuse, excessive exercise, that are all related to maintaining or achieving a certain body that you're looking for, whether that be a weight goal or a look. Avoidant restrictive food intake disorder is slightly different. It's more about fear of what food might do to your body. So that would be something like a child who had a choking incident and now they're afraid to eat similar foods. Someone with autism or some sensory disorder that just cannot eat foods of varying textures and are thus not getting what their body needs. Could be fear of abdominal pain. We often see this after patients who have had significant abdominal injuries or just a GI bug and now they're scared of food. Binge eating disorder is a loss of control around eating. Pica is non-nutrient intake. Rumination is regurgitation of food in an effortless way. And these other two categories we actually use quite frequently, and it's because it is when there is disordered eating that is affecting someone's life, but they don't quite fit the other criteria. So I just mentioned that 6% of patients with feeding and eating disorders do not have lower body weight. So they would fall into that atypical anorexia category. So that's what I'm talking about when I say feeding and eating disorders. Let's go to the next slide where we can see what Children's is seeing specifically. So again, these are patients who require medical stabilization for their malnutrition related to their feeding and eating disorder. And this is more focused on the anorexia and bulimia side than ARFID, or avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. So wow, what a spike in 2020. Can anybody think of anything just really small that might have happened in 2020? What we noticed is that there was a significant increase in patients with eating disorders. And anecdotally, we also noticed that they were coming in sicker. So when we think about why that happened, there was kind of a loss of control. So maybe patients were trying to control what they could. There was a focus on health in a way without necessarily giving a lot of instruction of what true, healthy, well-rounded, nutrient-dense eating looks like. Also, it's hard to sometimes see someone's weight loss or food changes or food behavior changes when it's happening directly in front of your eyes. So those regular pediatrician appointments were being canceled. Those family members that would come in from out of town and kind of be like, hey, I'm a little worried about Sally here. They weren't happening. We were isolated. Unless it was you were direly ill, you weren't getting care. So that's why we're seeing this big shift. We're starting to see it normalize a little bit. However, we are not back to the pre-COVID state. So now I want to shift to talking a little bit on the next slide about what resources exist in Georgia. So there are many pediatricians and family medicine providers who are the right place to start on this. They are going to talk to you about your weight, your electrolytes, your vital signs, and help you understand what you need more. There's also specific eating disorder treatment centers that can offer everything from where you go live somewhere for 24/7 care to programs that you go during the day, a few days a week, or just outpatient visits. And here are the names of these, and you'll have access to these slides. At lower levels of care, there are eating disorder therapists who use family-based treatment techniques, which is the gold standard for eating disorder treatment in the home. It basically means the ownership comes off the child and onto the parents, not of blame of eating disorder, simply of plating the food and supporting the intake. And there are also dietitians who specialize in eating disorders. Big gaps we are seeing is for those who have straight Medicaid or who are uninsured. There's pretty good resources out there for patients with private insurance or are able to cash pay, but we're struggling with that gap. SHOA is trying to reach and support that gap by building up some outpatient programming with some specialized eyes on patients with eating disorders, as well as the Strong for Life link that was just dropped in the chat that gives lots of information and education, not only to the community, but also to providers in the community to understand how to see this. So I'm not going to leave you with just kind of this dire information of what's going on in Georgia. I want to leave you with some resources that you can look at today. So on this next slide, you are going to see some international and national-based nonprofit options. So Feast is wonderful. It is a family-based and caregiver-based resource. They also have this first 30 days that is wonderful. You get for 30 days, a digestible size email with information about eating disorders. So you're like, I want to learn more. I do not have the heart or the stomach or the ability to spend all my time on this right now, but can you give me a little bit? And they have that. National Alliance for Eating Disorders and National Eating Disorder Association, as well as Feast, also have caregiver forums where you can get support. And they also offer information for treatment providers in the area. NADA, or the National Eating Disorder Association, offers English and Spanish resources, screeners, and treatment providers. So we'll just go to one more slide here. So let's all breathe for just a moment. We heard all this, we're worried. We're like, well, how should I talk about my body? If talking about healthy and healthy foods, which is what we worry about, means that we need to, could lead to eating disorders, how do we talk about our bodies? And I think that we want to think about it from a neutral stance. Our bodies are this vessel that help us do the things we want to do. And we want to feed it with nutrient-dense foods, and we want to give ourselves and our bodies grace for what it may look like, how it may act, how it may feel. So in thinking about how I want to look at my body, and I want my child to grow up thinking about her body, I thought this quote really spoke to it well. So it says, I said to my body softly, I want to be your friend. It took a long breath and replied, I have been waiting my whole life for this. So I'd like us to just end on that and think about how we can give grace to ourselves, our body, how we look in the mirror and peers around us when we think about nutrition. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to speak today. And I'm so grateful for the community partners who are helping that first step in food insecurity be improved so that then we can work on relationships with food going forward. This next slide just has my information for anybody who may need it. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Audrey with Resilient Georgia, who's the Regional Program Director.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kelsey. This is such important information that you shared and the resources. And I also really love that quote. And I want to thank all the speakers who shared their work today and insights about the many ways food and individual and community mental well-being interconnect. And thank you to all the attendees for spending time with us today. And I'm also so excited to announce the third door prize goes to Dr. Cooper Mink. So for all the prize winners, look out for an email at the end of this week. We'll reach out for your address and send you a food and mood gift basket. And Tiffany mentioned there's a Michael Twitty book, Georgia grown food, recipes from A Better Way Grocers, and stories about Georgia farming families in this gift basket. And thank you again for everyone for joining us today. Our general meeting is one way we celebrate our partners across the state. So today we heard about the ways we can greatly impact mental health through food, both on the individual level and on the food systems level, and the ways nourishment builds community and community resilience. We also hope that you connect with us after the meeting about any ways that you might have mobilized because of connections you made or information you learned from this meeting or any Resilient Georgia meeting. So please feel free to email me or anyone at the RG team, any stories you might have. They can just be 1 or 2 sentences. And we're also so excited to invite you to our next general meeting on November 14th, 2024, from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. We're so grateful you joined us today, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.